It's safe to say 2020 kinda sucked.
As a pandemic.
All was a man's life taken from.
The left. Will you shut up, man?
So maybe it shouldn't have come as a surprise to us when Cyberpunk 2077, one of the most hyped games of the last decade, managed to drop the ball so bad. There is a lot to unpack with the gaming industry in general, and the actions of CDPR, as of late, are just the tip of the iceberg. Sure, they deceived the console crowd, cut features, put their employees under crunch, and released a buggy and broken game. But at least there's no strangling co-workers or abusing gambling mechanics. As for this video though, I wanted to focus on offering up an opinion of potentially how a company like CDPR has found itself in its current predicament, the methodology behind the ambition versus the reality, and how the actual game of Cyberpunk 2077 as released gives us an insight into that.
Go back to your hole.
There's something about Cyberpunk 2077 that makes me feel there's more than just investor pressure or bad management. There's a genuine personality issue, a duality of identity that continuously collides with itself, breaking the game in more ways than just bugs and glitches. A disclaimer, I am a nobody. I play games, sure, but my occupation is working in the mines as a grunt, melting in the heat for months on end, so I am by no means an expert at anything. But I've got a long break and I'm bored, so here we go.
Work.
There's an idea that Night City is the real antagonist, a city steeped in chromed out fornication, greed and gluttony, built from the backs of generations past, ever enclosing on its citizens, strangling them with their own dreams and ambitions. Legends die, but Night City continues. I think this idea is relevant, but not to the game's narrative or to V as a protagonist, but rather to the devs themselves. So at some point Night City was possibly the antagonist, that V's path was possibly going to be one of greed and hedonism, and the player's choice would devolve into moral ambiguity of what it takes to be the best, the how much will you sacrifice mantra if you will. The sheer effort in which CDPR has clearly put into its world is obvious from the moment you load up. Yet, try and touch it and it shrivels up like a priest touching a boob.
We got a problem?
It's as if the general conception and building process of Night City inevitably enveloped the developers themselves. Blinded by the neon lights, they seem to have forgotten about what makes a city or a place truly rich in atmosphere and worthwhile, the people, or specifically in gaming terms, the AI. Currently it's said that the AI isn't working as intended, that it's one of the many bugs, and in certain cases I can see that as being true. However, the overall design of Night City's residents seems to be lacking any kind of cohesive scripting that prompts even basic AI procedures, and most certainly does not feel like a bug, but rather intentional. Beyond the NPCs attributed to quests, no one in Night City is going to be getting into a car, cops included. Those walking along the streets seem to be destined to wander until you are out of sight, finally giving them some reprise as they blink out of existence. There doesn't even seem to be a basic function of associated traits based on who is spawned.
Get an honest job.
This can even be seen in more story important facilities such as the Mox's Club, as the chick behind the counter has one line of dialogue before prompted into a rage.
Kiss my dead spunk!
It's as if the game has been built off the philosophy of look but don't touch. What makes things even more interesting when noting the exceptionally poor AI is not just that it's a complete 180 of what was promised, but rather the fact that CDPR are actually quoted as looking at Rockstar as an inspiration for how they operate as a company. You would then think in turn they'd also look at how Rockstar crafted their gaming worlds, especially when approaching a similar genre. So either we have to consider the idea that CDPR are actually one of the most incompetent developers out there that failed to even note the importance of AI behavior, or they were just simply unable to achieve something that is done regularly in prior games from almost the last 2 decades. Or we could consider that what has been presented in Cyberpunk is actually a very conscious decision, and they abstain from detailing the AI in an attempt to keep players on a particular trajectory. See, this dissonance between AI and Night City is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, at least you can talk to a random NPC.
No, I'm just fine.
As far as interacting with Night City any further than that, good luck. Outside of quests, you are left alone. There's no shots at the bar, no interactions with objects, no playing the arcade. You can't sit or lean unless it's prompted, and there's only 4 Joy Toys in the whole of Night City. BDs are a brilliant concept, shown a few times during main missions, but are completely void in the wider world. You can do some fist fighting and street racing, but they are tied to the quests, and once done, are absent from the game. The fact that these features are in the game during questing, but not outside of it, is even more perplexing, as CDPR are clearly aware of the immersion they add. And again we ask why. Incompetent developers, bad management, not enough time, or does it come down to a shift in direction? A conscious decision to keep you on a path?
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Illustrated as a major character-defining choice, the life path was akin to the origin selection in Dragon Age Origins, something that would establish key markers in your journey and define your V beyond their generic Merc title. This is of course just not true. There's nothing in the life paths that offer anything even remotely replayable, as they said. Now, people have claimed that the life paths were one of the victims of CDPR's cut content, but I'm not sure how much of these life paths are truly cut and just simply never existed.
Heard there's a new sword in Haywood. I'm Sebastian Ibarra. They call me Padre.
V, nice to meet you.
You serious?
Take it you were the one to call?
Got an offer for you.
Here you go. Paid in full.
Act 1 is, in my mind, a snippet of CDPR's original ambitions. During the quests that pick up, you are offered more choice and consequence than any other mission beyond the last one, where you are essentially picking your own endings. This is the only quest in the game that truly shares the lifeblood of CDPR's past work in regards to branching narratives from the Bloody Baron to Skellige Island. This quest, although nowhere near as deep and branching, is a perfect introduction to the overall design of a game that will offer player choice and consequence. Now, I look at this 2 ways. That CDPR consciously applied a level of flexibility into their first main mission to establish a precedent that would linger over the player and help cement the illusion of choice down the road. Or, this is the building blocks of a world with allegiances, consequences, and genuine player choice that CDPR had envisioned originally, only to backtrack in order to tell a specific story with a specific character. I mean, if you don't involve Militech and make nice with Royce or Brick, you will find a hidden merchant. You've got to glitch it to get to him, but he's only there if you make certain choices.
Like to see what you got in stock.
No funny business, no haggling, paid up front and in full. Got it?
Got it.
Nova. Otherwise I'll lose my manners.
Fixes can actually affect main missions, not in a seriously consequential way. However, it is interesting to note that specific gigs seem to prompt optional paths to take in main missions. Atomic Love has 2 major moments where seemingly the work you've done on the sideline comes around. Firstly, speaking to Woodman, if you've killed a particular mob boss, you can mention this to him and he'll tell you what you want to know. You'll get this info out of him regardless, but it's a nice touch to player choices beyond a dialogue wheel.
Guessing you heard about Jotaro Shobo?
Shobo had an accident.
What Shobo had was a very unfortunate meeting with me. Just happened to be his last. You wouldn't want this to be your last meeting, would you?
Of course not. Never wanted to be anything like Shobo.
Same with when trying to find a deadhead BD. If you've completed enough or specific missions for Wakako, she will help you get your hands on the BD.
Listen, I've seen what you can do. You've earned my respect, and I want you earning more of my eddies. So here's what's going to happen. I'll get you what you want. Just look out for a package.
These moments, coupled with gigs sometimes having specific requirements, knocking out targets, utilizing non-lethal approach, or making sure you're not being spotted, it's as if there is some kind of relationship you're forming with your actions with these fixes. Yet fail to meet these requests, and you'll still be rewarded. Berated with some words a bit, but ultimately they'll call you up again for more gigs.
You let the target die, V. Indeed, accidents happen. Nothing will change that now. But do you know where the true problem lies? You let me down, V. You're reckless, just as all of my husbands once were. V, you are to rescue Lauren Costigan, wife of Bradley Costigan.
There's a remnants of something more, especially with how fixers are portrayed. Their job ultimately revolves around making sure requests are fulfilled without any wires being crossed. It's something that they could fail at, and the consequences can be dire. There's an effort to establish a cost with being a fixer and with working with fixers. Yet, like so much of this game's fundamentals, it seems to have been gutted and left as merely a remnant of the system that may have been if focus wasn't shifted. All this is compressed by the ticking time bomb in V's head, a rather counterproductive measure when crafting an open and narratively entangled world, but a fine precedent when driving the player to seek conclusions and fast. It's a narrative beat that brings V and Silverhand closer, but pushes V and Night City away from each other.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Silverhand is, in my opinion, one of the best elements in this game. I loved him, and I love Keanu's performance. Obviously a very subjective opinion, but one that I feel should be noted. Because as much as I loved him, I couldn't help but feel it was Keanu who ultimately shifted the game's projection from what it was originally meant to be. Don't get me wrong, I do believe Silverhand was always going to be involved in the story, and that the engram was to play a part judging from the mention of him way back in 2017. But landing Keanu seemed big, in fact it seems like a game changer. This is all projection of course, but considering the massive hype that came with Keanu's involvement, it does feel like CDPR felt that they had an opportunity that couldn't be squandered. So much so that I'd argue Silverhand shifted from playing a role in V's story to essentially becoming the main protagonist. Now I think this is a brilliant move on one hand, and credit where credit's due. Player-driven characters are a difficult sell, and do lead to the discussion of if voiced protagonists in RPGs are actually better than non-voiced. Having the devil on your shoulder could be a brilliant way to circumvent this, and Johnny is fantastic as your choices don't just help define V, though admittedly in a very limited sense, they also help with Johnny's character arc. However, V is voiced, and is supposedly the main protagonist, but due to the fact that so much emphasis is on Johnny's tale, it really does feel as if V is just a casualty to CDPR wanting to tell Silverhand's story. This man wants redemption, he wants a second chance, and oh yeah, you're his vessel and you want, well, to live. Forget those dreams of grandeur. Of course you can opt to object against his redemption arc, but you'll still do what Johnny ultimately wants. There's a lot to break down, and as stories go, it's fucking gold, just not a very open world RPG choice matters kind of gold. The involvement of Keanu has certainly come at a cost, not just for his time, but for the vision of Night City. CDPR paid a heavy price to utilize Keanu in the way that they did. It truly does feel, as they lent in on their opportunity to work with Keanu, they slowly lost their sights on the rest of Night City. For all the features cut or stripped back, none involve Keanu. He is everywhere. Always present, always the focus. Through his eyes you'll party, drink, fuck, and rock out. Through his eyes you'll experience the world of promises delivered in slick marketing imagery and videos. Through his eyes you'll fight the corpos and build your legend. Through Johnny, you'll be offered a world of endless promise. But when V blinks, when the blockers are taken, when the rock and roll dies down, all you'll have to look at is a beautiful painting you shouldn't touch and a phone buzzing you can't ignore, so you can be drawn into your next hit of Johnny Silverhand, a Night City special.
That came off wrong.
V who?
I
V where? How did you even
am
get this number?
simply not used to such questions.